Good morning, everybody. It's so good getting back with all of you after my recent bout with the stomach virus. It took 2 weeks of recovery. Bill Rowland really helped out and said he would see to it that my assigned time could be done until I returned. Bill started us off in our beginning study in Colossians, as you know. They're not here today. They knew I was teaching, so they didn't show up. But today, even though it is our wonderful day celebrating Easter, I will be closing us out in our final study in Matthew. You know, I have always marveled at how Jesus could take reprobates like Saul, who became Paul, and then he goes into this tax collector, Matthew, and walks in and he says, Matthew, put down everything you've got. Put down your quill, put down the paper, put down everything you've got and follow me. And the Bible tells us that Matthew, without question, he came out, he closed the door, and from then on. Why? Now let me ask you this, and there are no wrong answers, no wrong answers. Why do you think Jesus was so determined to get Matthew?
Well, he wasn't popular, so maybe his change would be pretty dramatic to the people.
Right, Nancy said he wasn't popular, so maybe he could just change, which of course he did. I have a theory. I think Jesus came after Matthew because, one, he was very smart. He could read, he could write, he was eloquent. He had to because he had a franchise from Rome. Anybody know what a franchise is? It's an area protection. Since I was vice president of franchising for Days Ends many years ago, I was vice president of franchising for all of that time, and I know exactly what franchising is. Matthew paid a price. He paid Rome for this franchise. Rome says, hey, look, I've got all these soldiers over there in Israel trying to keep order, trying to keep control. They've got to be clothed. They've got to be fed. They've got to be housed. Well, I'm not going to pay that, the emperor of Rome. He said, no, I'm not going to pay for it. The Jews in Israel are going to pay for it. They're there. I know they don't want to be there. And so what we're going to do, we're going to get tax collectors who will come and in their area, and they will tax the people. Now, Mary Lou and I went last week, just Friday, and we paid our taxes. We went to H&R Block like we do every year, and we did all of that, and that was fine. We didn't mind it because we live in the United States of America. They didn't like it because these Jewish tax collectors were giving that money to Rome to help defray the cost of clothing, feeding, and all of that. And the people resented it. They resented them being there in the first place. And in the second place, they just did not want to be taxed to keep people that they didn't want in there. Certainly understandable. But he was very smart. He had to be able to read and write because he was handling stuff like that. Matthew had that area franchise. Bill Rowland, Nancy Harper, and Steve Ivy and I studied the Gospel of Matthew for 13 lessons. I will be closing us out in lesson 13 today, which is the Master's Touch. It's unusual on Easter to be teaching a lesson that is not an Easter service. And I felt a little strange about it as I got ready for it, but I realized that it needed to be done. Matthew needs to be closed out. It's a wonderful, wonderful gospel, the Gospel of Matthew. And Matthew gave us a wide range of lessons involving Jesus, overcoming temptation, Jesus touching the leper, get out of the boat. You all remember when I taught get out of the boat? Okay, great reception on that. Power over death, to name a few. So today, we're going to be in Matthew, the 20th chapter, 29 through 34. Matthew, the 29th chapter, the 20th chapter, 29 through 34. And here is our lesson passage for today. And as they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed Jesus. And behold, there were two blind men sitting on the road, by the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." The crowd rebuked them, telling them to be silent. But they cried out all the more, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." And stopping, Jesus called them and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." And Jesus, in pity, touched their eyes, and immediately they recovered their sight and followed Jesus. Class, blindness was very, very common in that country at that time. And the majority of blind people during that time were beggars. Why do you think they were beggars? They couldn't see. They had to rely on people, didn't they? They were beggars. They were begging. They didn't have, and I think of the wonderful eye clinics and all that we have here. And Mary Lou and I go to the Thomas Eye Clinic, and you know, you need those things. And there's probably not a person in here that has not had an inspection of their eyes and so forth. But back then, there were no clinics. There was nothing. These people, if they got blind, and many did, they were at the mercy of people to feed them and take care of them. It was a desperation, and they saw this opportunity for Jesus to heal them, and they screamed and hollered, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." When I think of the many times Mary Lou and I have gone to our clinic, as I said, and the great things that clinic has done for us, I have a profound feeling for these two men. Here is the story, folks, of two men who found their way to a miracle. It is a very significant story, for it paints a picture of the spirit and of the attitude of mind and heart. These two men were waiting, and when their chance came, they seized it with both hands. No doubt they had heard of the wondrous power of Jesus, and no doubt they wondered if that power might ever be obtained by them. Jesus was passing by. If they let him pass, their chance would be gone forever. What the crowd did at that time makes me sick at my stomach. What was the reaction of the crowd? Were they saying, "Oh yeah, you all are so nice, come over here," and so forth? No. They rebuked him. They rebuked the two men and told them to be silent. That's easy for them to say, isn't it? Yeah. And that they were making nuisances of themselves. I have a hard time thinking about these people being so ignorant and so non-caring. They rebuked the two men and told them to be silent and that they were making nuisances of themselves. What does that say about human nature? It's all about me. It's all about me. The two men called Jesus the Son of David. Anybody want to comment on why they called Jesus that? You all are having a hard time today, aren't you? Hello? The two men called Jesus the son of David, because King David was known as the warrior king, glorious in battle. That meant that they did not believe that, that meant that they did believe Jesus to be the Messiah, but it also meant that they were thinking of messiahship in terms of kingly and of earthly power in battle. That was an imperfect faith, but they acted on it, and Jesus accepted it. I love that. Sometimes when we do something stupid or something like that, and we say, oh, Jesus, I'm so sorry. Jesus will accept it. We're all human. All of us do things we shouldn't do, and sometimes we don't do things we should do. So this is the situation. It was an imperfect faith that they acted on, calling him the son of David. But Jesus accepted it. However imperfect it may be, if faith is there, Jesus accepts it. Class, so many people, both in things material and in things spiritual, get what they want and forget ever to say thanks. I think so many times, and then I think, and judge not, Wallace, that you not be judged. But sometimes I think people have a tendency to be spoiled. They get everything they want, when they want it, at the same time, and so forth, and servants and all of that, and they don't really appreciate what they have. And I'm talking about myself sometimes. I just don't feel like sometimes I may not appreciate what I've got. And I try every day to thank the Lord, and I know you all do too. This is like teaching to the choir. Ingratitude is the ugliest of all sins. We need to have an attitude of gratitude. We need to have an attitude of gratitude, because ingratitude is the ugliest of all sins. Oh, how happy I was when I studied our lesson to learn that these two men gave Jesus their grateful loyalty. Now I'm going to tell something that I haven't even told Mary Lou that happened to Cliff Wagner and I. Talk about you, Cliff. Cliff Wagner and I, before I got real sick, we were on our way into church for Sunday school a few weeks back. So Cliff and I, Mary Lou was at home convalescing from pneumonia, and so it was just the two of us. So Cliff and I were walking across the street, and we got right to the entrance to one of the church, one of the entrances. A man was at one of the lesser doors into our church, and this man had only one leg and was in some sort of wheelchair. You remember it, Cliff? Sure you do. He asked us if we would help him out with any money so he could buy breakfast. Both of us gave him a monetary gift, and I thought of that incident when I got into this lesson. You remember that? It was so good being with Cliff, and to see Cliff didn't say anything to me. I didn't say anything to Cliff. He didn't say, oh, let's go give money, but we both did. And I got into it when I was teaching this lesson. The song, because I have been given much, I too must give. Remember it? Beautiful song. I also think that sometimes we may entertain angels unaware. As saying, that guy could have been an angel unaware. It didn't matter whether he was an angel or not. He needed help, and we gave him help. Did anybody have a similar story to that? When you did something and you wondered if you might have been doing it to an angel? Remember a few weeks back when I told you all about the synoptic gospels? Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the three synoptic gospels. Synoptic means seen together. Matthew's account of our passage today differs from Mark and Luke. Matthew says this miracle took place as Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, whereas Mark and Luke say that the miracle took place as they were arriving. A discrepancy? Maybe not. There were two Jerichos. The first one was mostly abandoned, though still inhabited. King Herod the Great built a new Jericho due south of the old Jericho. So sometimes we don't need to get too uptight over the difference between Matthew, Mark, and Luke, because what they're basically saying is the same thing. They just make, it would be like you and I walking out of the church and talking about something, and you would remember what I had said, might remember what you said, or maybe not. In light of two Jerichos, Jesus could have performed this miracle as he was leaving one and entering another. Our lesson today follows the details in Matthew's account, and that's where we're going to leave it. If you and I traveled all over the world and into many of the cities around the world, we may be shocked to see so many people asking, as Cliff and I did, for some spare change. It is most unusual here in the city of Roswell, but prevalent in other places. Has anyone, I know so many of you travel all over the place, have any of you ever traveled anywhere particular where somebody asked for money? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, Joanne?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just recently.
see? And you just don't know when it's gonna happen. And sometimes I thoroughly believe that we entertain angels unaware at many times, or have the opportunity. These
Well,
two,
I passed this lady who was on the street. There were two of them, and she had her thing out, her cup out. And I passed her, and I just felt like I had to go back and give her something, just,
yeah,
and that's what
you,
I did.
you felt that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar experience one time going into Kroger. And you just don't know, and if you feel like it, you ought to do it. I believe that. The added difficulty the two beggars had that day was the hostility of the crowd. Be quiet, you two are a nuisance. Well, that was easy for them to say. They could see. These two might have been a nuisance for them, but they were not a nuisance for Jesus. Three things the two men did that resulted in their healing. One, when their chance came, they seized it. When Jesus passed by, they did not hesitate. In our lives, there are times when we must decide and make a move. How many opportunities are lost because we fail to act? As I said in a previous lesson, we have to get out of the boat. Remember when I taught, we have to get out of the boat. That sometimes we are, if you use it as a metaphor, we many times are very comfortable. We're in the boat, we have that comfort, and Jesus tells us, hey, you've got to get out of the boat and you've got to go out and witness. These two men could not be silenced. The mob did not intimidate them. And thirdly, they acted on the faith they possessed. Their theology was skewed when they called Jesus the Son of David, showing Jesus incorrectly in terms of military might. They saw Jesus as their deliverer from the power of Rome, but Jesus did not come to mount rebellion against Rome. Our lesson writer today made an astute revelation. He said there are two kinds of blindness. Do you know that? There are two kinds of blindness, physical and spiritual. Blindness of the eyes is a terrible, tragic condition. But there's a blindness even more devastating than blindness of the eyes, and that is spiritual blindness. Spiritual blindness keeps people like us from seeing, that is, understanding and knowing God's truth. Obviously, we here in this lesson today know of the utmost importance of of spiritual truth. And that finishes our lesson for today. Matthew, that tax collector, that reprobate, that man that every Jew in Israel hated, turned out to be this brilliant writer of one of the most fantastic gospels. His intelligence and his ability to let people know what he was saying shows so eloquently in the Gospel of Matthew. It is a sacred, wonderful book in our Bible. So, with anything as we close? Well, I can't let Easter go by without, I'll close this out in an Easter prayer. Let's pray, please. Dear Lord, this Easter I walked beside you as you were betrayed and rejected, broken and crucified, separated and afflicted. I sat at the table where you shared your last supper. I stood at the foot of the cross where you died, and I waited beside the tomb where your body lay. I am humbled at all the ways you suffered and endured the events of Easter. But Lord, I know that your story does not end in a dark tomb. You rose again. Today I live in the reality that you endured all things so that I can have abundant life. Help me to share this good news with others in each and every way. For we ask this in your humble name on this beautiful Easter day. Amen.